Stories of dolphins helping people go back thousands of years, whether helping fishermen catch fish or rescuing drowning sailors or even protecting people from shark attacks. But few dolphins individually have become celebrities or have been specifically recognized for the good that they've done. One famous dolphin, though, lived off the coast of New Zealand in the late 1800s, swam alongside hundreds of ships, and became a beloved figure, both for locals and foreigners alike. It was even described as the best-known fish in the world, despite not being a fish. The story of Pelorus Jack, the famed dolphin navigator, deserves to be remembered. Stories of helpful dolphins date back at least to ancient Greece and appear in frescoes in the ruined palace of the Minoans on Crete. In Greek myth, dolphins are nearly always helpers and associated with numerous deities. Aphrodite is associated with them, as is her son Eros, who is often depicted astride one. In Amazonian folklore, dolphins are considered magical shapeshifters, and in Hinduism they are often venerated thanks to their connection with the sacred Ganges River. Stories of them saving humans in shipwrecks at sea abound through various cultures and into the modern era. In New Zealand, the Maori often describe dolphins as water spirits. Groups living around Cook Strait speak of the spirit that resembles a whale that would serve as a guide in the tricky waters between the North and South Islands. When people hear dolphin, they usually imagine the bottlenose dolphin, which is by far the one most commonly depicted and the one kept most often in captivity. However, there are at least 40 species identified as dolphins, including oceanic dolphins and numerous river dolphins. They also vary widely in appearance, from the small Maui dolphin to the orca, the largest of the dolphin family. Among them is Risso's dolphin, named for a 19th century naturalist and zoologist, Antoine Risso, who named over 500 marine genera and species. Risso's dolphins range over much of the world, from the colder waters of Alaska and northern Scotland to the tropics. Unlike bottlenose dolphins, they have a flat face, more like an orca or beluga whale. They have a pronounced shark-like dorsal fin, but perhaps their most defining feature is their extensive white scars. The scarring comes mostly from social interaction and is pronounced because the skin doesn't repigment. They generally grow to about 10 feet in length, between 660 and 1,100 pounds, making it the largest species actually called dolphin. They primarily eat squid, and because they don't need teeth to do so, their teeth are used solely for battling in mating conflicts. According to legend, in 1888, a Boston schooner called Brindle was approaching French Pass, a notoriously difficult stretch of water with several whirlpools near the northern tip of the South Island of New Zealand, when a large white fish appeared. As sailors are wont to do, several of the sailors wanted to shoot the creature, but according to the story, the captain's wife talked them out of it. According to the legend, the fish then guided the ship through dangerous water before disappearing into the sea. The story, possibly apocryphal, is supposedly the first appearance of a dolphin that came to be known as Pelorus Jack. Another origin story is recounted in the Camden, New Jersey Courier Post. Captain W.K. Turner claimed that he had seen the fish while he was aboard a cutter in the area in 1874 or earlier. He also says that the women persuaded him not to harpoon the harmless creature. George Webber, who was a child in 1888 and whose father took mail from steamers, remembers the big white fish appeared around 1888, which he saw frequently in the 1890s. Webber says that Jack would swim up so close to their small open boat that my father used to tell me to five him with a push from a boat hook or an oar so that he wouldn't capsize the boat. According to a 1940 article in the Canberra Times, it took a little longer for him to become world famous. Captain Frank Bullen described him in the London Evening Standard. In the next few years, his story appeared in London's Strand magazine and the Boston Herald. By 1910, the London Daily Mirror dubbed him the best-known fish in the world, and the Edmonton Journal called him the most famous marine creature since Jonah's whale. Risso's dolphins are not common around New Zealand, although it is within their large Pacific range. According to a 1913 article in the Mid-Pacific magazine, around 50 years earlier, a pod of similar fish had been sighted in Pelorus Sound, and that this fish was thought to be the only survivor. Whether he first appeared to the crew of the Brindle or some other ship, he soon became a local celebrity. By 1902, he was said to have followed ships for many years. He took on the name Pelorus Jack, although its origin is uncertain. A Pelorus is a ship instrument, but he seems to have gotten his name from Pelorus Sound, although he doesn't seem to have spent much time in that sound itself, instead being sighted commonly just outside it. Why he was called Jack is even less clear. It might come from a common term for sailors, a jackdaw, or merely a common name. Jack's actual sex was never determined. At least initially, what animal Jack wasn't clear. He's usually called a fish and was identified in a 1904 book, Animals of New Zealand, as a beluga whale. Belugas, however, live only in the frigid waters of the Arctic seas of the Northern Hemisphere, on the opposite side of the planet from New Zealand. D.C. Bates would be among the first to identify him as a Risso's dolphin. Edgar Ravenswood-Waite, a zoologist and a curator at the Canterbury Museum in New Zealand, also identified him as a Risso's dolphin, describing him as grey, curiously marked with scratch-like lines, which are probably caused by the cuttlefishes which form the staple food of the grampus. Another eyewitness described Jack as a dolphin of bluish-white color, tinged with purple and yellow, and with irregular brown-edged scratch-like lines covering the upper surface of his body. Modern articles about Jack universally say he guided ships through Cook Strait, but contemporary eyewitness descriptions, however, seem to contradict this. They usually describe him merely visiting and playing near the ships. A 1902 article describes how he typically appeared. Then the streak moved. A great, glistening brown fin broke the water. He made straight for the hole, shouldered it in a friendly way, and then went merrily along with us. A journalist who traveled to the area to see Jack described him in an article in 1906. He darted from side to side of our rushing cutwater. Then he dived under our keel, then shot ahead again, and turning a complete somersault, treated us to what I can only describe as a display of marine hurdle racing, with a circus exhibition thrown in. The dolphin appeared bright in the dark water, a phosphorescent fish, a gleam along the water like a small comet. Most descriptions match these. While he was often called a pilot fish, he doesn't seem to have actually guided the ships, and his general path ran from the Chetwood Islands to the edge of French Pass in Cook Strait, never through the dangerous pass itself. Risso's dolphins are commonly seen doing similar behaviors, including surfing in bow wakes, which is perhaps the best explanation of what Jack was actually doing. Rissos, however, are usually found in pods of at least a few dozen individuals, making Jack's solitary appearance notable. Another explanation offered in multiple articles is that Jack was feeding on the octopus and squid that were caught on the ship's bows. If he did lead any ships, it was by sticking to deeper waters, as he would do naturally. Many international reports at the time said Jack led ships through the pass, but were also refuted. In 1932, a letter to the editor of the Sydney Morning Herald sought to establish a few facts regarding Pelorus Jack, including that the captains who waited for Jack to pilot them through the pass were really actually waiting for the tide to turn. Jack was, however, extremely punctual when he met ships as they exited French Pass into Admiralty Bay. Numerous articles referred to his appearance at a particular time. One article had a sailor checking his watch and confidently stating, "You will see him in about 10 minutes from now." Another passenger was told, "Jack will be here at 5:30 sharp." He appeared without fail, day or night. One of the reasons he could do so is that dolphins do not actually fully sleep, instead putting one side of their brain into a sleep-like state and alternating to allow their brain to get rest, usually in small bursts throughout the day. He preferred certain ships over others, and only appeared for steam-powered ships, not for sail-powered ones. He also had his favorites, which seem to have changed over time, but including the penguin and the patina. Sometimes he stayed for a while other times only for a few minutes. A famous story about Jack recalls when a passenger shot at him from the deck of the Penguin in 1904, and from then on Jack avoided the Penguin. In 1909, the Penguin left Picton in good weather on its way to Wellington. By 8 p.m., the weather had turned, and 2 hours later in Cook Strait, the captain attempted to turn the ship further out to sea to ride out the storm. The ship hit a large rock and began taking on water. Women and children were rushed to lifeboats, but the rough seas sank the boats, and nearly all of the passengers drowned. Survivors clung to rafts for hours before they reached safety. As water poured into the engine room, the cold water caused the boilers to violently explode. 75 people were killed in one of New Zealand's deadliest maritime disasters. Later, people suggested that the Penguin would have been safe, except that Jack was not there to guide it. But the tragedy of the Penguin doesn't belong on Jack's shoulders. Jack likely was never truly a guide, and the rock that Penguin hit was far outside Jack's limited range. But the historical record also brings into question the whole story that he was shot at from the Penguin. In 1907, an article appeared in the Boston Herald describing Jack from the perspective of William H. Bain. Bain had seen Jack himself from the deck of the Penguin and after 1904. The story goes on to say that since Mr. Bain made his trip, Pelorus Jack had taken a dislike to the Penguin. He got too close and had a severe collision, ripping his back so that the scar shows when he leaps out of the water. Several other articles mention him getting too close to a boat and getting dinged, but the Bain article also mentioned separately that someone had shot and wounded him. Other articles also mention the shooting, although they disagree on whether he was wounded and whether the Penguin had anything to do with it. The risk of actual shooting did lead, however, to outcry to protect the dolphin, who had become a tourist attraction to be protected. There was an argument over how to do so and what kind of animal Jack was. Bates, who worked at the Colonial Museum, put that to rest when he definitively identified Jack as a Risso's dolphin. On September 26, 1904, by an order in council under Governor Plunkett, that during the period of 5 years from the date of the gazetting of these regulations, it shall not be lawful for any person to take the fish or mammal or the species commonly known as Risso's dolphin in the waters off Cook Strait, or of the bays, sounds, and estuaries adjacent. The order was remarkable, as it appeared to be the earliest law that sought to protect a particular marine animal. Jack was the only Risso's dolphin known to be in those waters. Some did make fun of the order. One wrote wondering whether a proclamation is valid seeking to protect a mammal under an act for the protection of sea fishes. Notably, there's a reference in a 1902 article by Helen Spencer in the Australasian that implied that another protection order may have been enacted as early as 1889. Maori in the region attached a significant amount of spiritual significance to Jack, who was, according to Kipahemi-Wiro, a Maori leader, renowned for his ability to communicate with the Kaikaiawaro, a kind of protector deity of one of the tribes of Maori living in the nearby sounds. In 1910, a Maori called Kippa the last man who knew how to call the tribe's guardian and a historian of the tribe. Kippa called Jack a chief in the ocean. He is the embodiment of our tribal mana. He is our family guardian god. According to him, the dolphin called Pelorus Jack was at least several hundred years old, and that he was brought to the area by the first Maori to reach those sounds. The Pelorus River, which winds into Pelorus Sound, was caused by Jack's attempt to force a passage through to the sea on the other side. The white dolphin, in the time before the arrival of Europeans, was also known as a pilot and guide for Maori boats, and he played around their bows, just as he does today around the steamers and launches. Kippa told several other stories about how the white dolphin had helped his ancestors. At the time, multiple papers mused about Jack's potential age. Considerably less was known about dolphins at the time, and D.C. Bates mused that since members of the cetacean order are known to live for 2 centuries, we may hope that there may still be many years of peaceful life for Pelorus Jack. But modern knowledge puts the lifespan of Risso's dolphins at just 20 or 30 years, while the longest-lived known individual is just under 40 years old. For at least several decades, Jack followed the steamer ships in his chosen stretch of water, becoming incidentally famous as he did whatever it is that dolphins do. But as with all things, it eventually came to an end. Jack's exact end is not known. His body was never definitively identified. In 1911, he was reported dead, only for it to be contradicted. But in 1912, he seems to have disappeared for some time. Obituaries were written for him, and in 1914, the Marlborough Express wrote that it was feared that Jack had finally disappeared. It's the year most reports agree that he disappeared for good, but newspaper articles continue to mention him, claiming reports of his death were much exaggerated. He was reported dead again in 1916 and as late as 1922. There were even reports that he was attempting to train a protege. The cause of his death is even less certain. Many suspect Norwegian whalers who allegedly were in the area in 1912 and would not have known about his protection, while other stories claim he was killed when a new double-screwed steamer clipped him. There are reported rumors that a man confessed on his deathbed to finding and killing Jack, yet others report that he simply washed ashore one day, dead of old age, and was never properly identified before his carcass was gone. Decades later, a second dolphin behaving similarly in a new location was dubbed Pelorus Jack II. The generally accepted story is that Jack was active from 1888 to 1912, which is a reasonable lifespan for a Risso's dolphin, although his legend seems to have gone somewhat beyond his actual life. Still, we can learn from that legend. Pelorus Jack became famous for doing just what came naturally to him, being a dolphin. And while he isn't the only famous dolphin in history, he is still remembered today, immortalized in poetry and song. He adorns the side of the inter-islander ferries that operate in New Zealand in the same waters where he once swam. A statue was dedicated to him, placed near the Marlborough Sounds in 2016, and heck, there's even a candy bar named after him. And if he really is a water spirit, like the Maori believe, well, the Maori also believe that those spirits can sleep for a long time, leaving open the possibility that Pelorus Jack might one day return to play in the waters of the Marlborough Sounds. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community and locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from the History Guy on Cameo.